Hi, so this is my presentation on poliomyelitis, and my name is Santana Bustamante. So, what is polio? So, poliomyelitis, or more commonly known just as polio, is a highly infectious viral disease. It mainly affects young children, but anyone of any age who is not vaccinated can get infected. It can only infect humans. The virus is transmitted through contaminated food and water, via fecal oral route, and once there, it can multiply in the gastrointestinal tract. Um, So from there, it can actually begin to invade the nervous system, such as the central nervous system. So most people will not show any symptoms. Only about 1 in 4 people actually who do indeed have polio will actively show flu-like symptoms. The people who do have polio and if it's severe, this can result in different types of symptoms, such as acute flaccid and partial or full paralysis, which can cause difficulty to breathe or even death. So not everyone who recovers from polio will completely recover. Children can go on to develop muscle weakness or pain or paralysis as they become adults, actually. So, for what agent that causes polio? So, for the pathogenic agents, to give some background on the agent structure before going into detail about the agent itself, the morphology of picornaviruses are small. It has a diameter of 25 to 30 nanometers. Its outer coat or capsid is composed of 60 copies of 4 different polypeptides, which are arranged with an icosahedral symmetry. All the 4 virions are made of 8 strands of protein arranged in beta sheet array, forming a beta barrel small. And for the poliovirus, it's a human enterovirus, meaning it's single-stranded positive sense RNA genome, and it is non-enveloped. And as mentioned before, the family belongs to the Cornaviridae, which is the causative agent of poliomyelitis. So humans are the only natural hosts, as mentioned before, of this virus. A poliovirion consists of a single-stranded RNA genome of positive polarity and a non-enveloped capsid that comprises 60 copies of each of 4 capsid proteins. So we have like VP1, VP2, VP3, and VP4. Once it enters through our oropharynx, which is like our nose and throat area, it then will start to like multiply, and it starts to incubate in the body, which lasts from about like 2 to 35 days. It just depends on environmental factors, I'm sure. There are some theories that I saw in the sources that scientists believe actually that the virus can enter the bloodstream and then invade our tonsils. So yeah, after about 3 to 5 days, the virus will be shed in your stool, and you can actually swab someone's throat, like a throat swab, and from exposed patients, and it will still be there. So following this, you can be asymptomatic, or you can get small bouts of other illnesses like gastroenteritis, respiratory infection, or even the flu. Some interesting material I found on the pathogenic agent was that for the genome of the poliovirus, it functions as mRNA in the cytoplasm of infected cells. This means that the virus-specific translation process begins with the entry of ribosomes into the internal ribosome entry site within the 5' non-coding sequence of the RNA. For the etiology manifestation of polio, so etiology means the cause or set of causes from a disease or condition. And for some historical context, it's thought that poliomyelitis goes far back today around the time of ancient Egypt, so about 6,000 years ago. This can be seen on some hieroglyphs, such as in this photo. You see this man. You can see like his leg. It looks like his right leg. It's like a lot thinner than the other one. It's like deformed. A lot of early researchers thought that was polio, like the first like documentation of it. And it wasn't actually seen until the 20th century that polio had come out of hiding, and it became an epidemic in the U.S. And the world. And in the 1940s and 50s, it was most prominent, and a vaccine had to be made. Now, for the scientific part, so it as mentioned before, mainly spreads with the fecal oral route contact. This usually occurs from poor hand washing or from consuming contaminated water or foods. Sneezing and coughing can spread the virus actually. It once there like once it's in your system, it can infect and multiply in the throat and small intestine. It's gonna then migrate to lymph nodes and into your bloodstream. If it persists in the blood, it would then it would become viremia, and which is kind of similar to sepsis. So it will then start to penetrate the capillary wall and enter the CNS, so your central nervous system, where the virus has a high affinity actually for motor neurons. And that makes a lot of sense because it mainly affects your spinal cord and your limbs, and that has to do with your CNS right there, the motor neurons. And the human race is the only known reservoir for polio. So in this photo here, you can see there's a person, they're using the bathroom, like in like the water stream right there, which is like probably like their water system that they use in this like village or town. And they're like their feces, it's gonna contaminate the water, and then it goes into like the water supply that people use, and it's gonna make it bad, and people are gonna consume and use it. They eat it, and then it's gonna get into their system, and it's just a cycle. For the signs and symptoms, so there can be a fever, body aches, headache, nausea, fatigue, sore throat, stiffness, a lot. A majority of cases will actually go further than that. But like I said before, if the viremia persists, paralysis of motor nerves and death by respiratory failure can occur. And most infants in third world countries are known to be asymptomatic. The three most deadly symptoms are paresthesia, which is like the feeling of pins and needles in your limbs, meningitis, which is the infection of the covering of the brain and spinal cord, and paralysis, which is absent or reduced ability to move the limbs and the breathing muscles. Symptoms usually last 2 to 5 days, and then they disappear. But like I said before, most people will not, however, show any symptoms while they're infected. So here are some interesting photos I found online. So the first one, we have a young boy who looks like he lost the use of his legs, which is very unfortunate. It looks like he has a leg braces on. He has to use the 2 canes to help him walk. It's funny because throughout like time period movies we've all watched, I'm sure, that's supposed to be like in the 1940s or 50s. Sometimes they'll portray a character who has polio. In the second photo down in the middle, I was actually able to find a microscopic photo of the polio virus. So here we can see it. The information provided for me by this photo told me that, as I said before, it's a single-stranded positive RNA genome. It has an icosahedral protein coat, which is also known as capsid. Means that it has a spherical structure surrounding the nucleic acid genome of a virus, which we can see in this photo here. And they look like small soccer balls, if you ask me. In this last photo, it's actually Elvis Presley. Yeah, that's Elvis, and he's at 21 years old. He actually helped in the campaign against polio by getting the vaccine. So yeah, that's him. He would go and visit patients. That's a little girl right there. You can see it when she's wearing the March of Dimes. That was a big part of like a foundation against the polio, and Elvis had a big part in that. So for pathogenesis, if you don't know what pathogenesis is, it's the manner of development of a disease. So the way that polio works itself into our bodies and begins to start decimating our bodily functions is by 2 different strategies. So you have your peripheral nerves, which is the nervous system, and possibly the triple B, like BBB, blood-brain barrier. So once infection begins, it's thought that it will invade local lymphoid tissue, enter the bloodstream, and then can proceed to infect the central nervous system. Now, a serotype, which is an identifiable strain of a microorganism, for polio, there are 3 serotypes that are recognized. You have type 1, type 2, and type 3. And this is what prominently causes polio to be present endemically through infection among susceptible infants and women of childbearing age. Replications of the poliovirus in motor neurons of the anterior horn and brainstem that actually results in cell destruction and causes the typical manifestations of poliomyelitis. So the advances in our technology has actually allowed us to investigate the key steps of the pathogenesis of poliomyelitis at the molecular level. It's shown that PV induces apoptosis, and that's like an important component of the tissue injury in the central nervous system of infected mice, and that can lead to paralysis. So for the virulence factors. So the virulence factors for polio are very adaptable. It requires them to be due to them having to support themselves while in the gastrointestinal tract, which is where they are most successful at reproducing. After ingestion, it must bind to and enter cells via its cellular receptor, which is a major susceptibility factor. It's thought that the poliovirus must go through a different number of hurdles to survive. First it must endure the inter-host period and resist inactivation from temperature, pH, and other things, pH changes, It's also thought that poliovirus cannot survive in the environment for more than a couple of weeks, but under optimal conditions, it can endure in the long run. So, since the virus is non-enveloped, it's able to resist inactivation by bile salts. For the portal of entry, it relies heavily, it seems, in the mucous membranes. I don't know if you guys saw in the last film. Let me show it again here. You see the mucosal surface? Yeah, it really does like that. It's gonna penetrate that layer to gain access to the susceptible cell types below. And and as I said before, it relies heavily on the epithelial cells of the mucous membrane and motor neurons in the CNS. Now, onto the epidemiology. So, epidemiology of poliomyelitis. Now, if you don't know what epidemiology is, I'm sure you do. It's the study and analysis of the distribution, patterns, and determinants of health and disease conditions in defined populations. So, for the prevalence, the number of worldwide polio cases has fallen from an estimated 350,000 in 1988 to 407 in 2013, which is a decline of more than 99% in reported cases. So 4 regions in the world are certified polio-free, as you can see in this map, in the 2018. So yeah, you have the Americas are free, Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Western Pacific are free. So, in 2018, the polio endemic countries, which are countries that have never interrupted the transmission of wild polio, they still had it, and that was Afghanistan, Nigeria, and Pakistan. For the temporal pattern, it seemed that the poliovirus infection typically peaks in the summer months in the temperate climates, and it appears there is no seasonal pattern in tropical climates. For people who are at most risk, it's for children mainly under the age of 5 years old. So, as long as the person remains infected, anybody in any country are at risk of, contracting polio. And it had been most prevalent from 1916 and onward. As said before, the early to the mid 20th century had to endure a polio epidemic each summer, with the most deaths occurring in the 40s and 50s. So now, as of recently, from last year, only 2 countries actually now remain. So that's Afghanistan and Pakistan. So we're seeing improvements still from 2018. And there was an incident report recently, a few months ago, back in April. The CDC had actually reissued a global polio alert at level 2, where there were outbreaks, in detections in 38 countries. So that's pretty recent. That's pretty significant. You can see here in this map, the blue represents the 2 countries that still are endemic to, and all these countries in orange. Yeah, those are the 38 countries I think that had reported it. So what's interesting is that also the European CDC also said that their vaccine, poliovirus type 2, was found in their wastewater system in 14 cities across 5 countries in Europe, as well as this year. So that's pretty significant. The theory is that also people who aren't getting vaccinated are not just because there aren't people who don't believe in vaccines, but the problems of vaccine coverage in these other countries where people don't have access to medical amenities is troubling, because it can facilitate the spread of the disease, such as in these countries. For the eradication efforts, so there's a surveillance system which helps identify new cases and detects any circulation of polio. So the 4 steps to it are finding and reporting children who have acute flaccid paralysis, transporting stool samples for analysis, isolating and identifying poliovirus in the lab. The 4th one is mapping the virus to determine the origin of the virus strain. Another method is environmental surveillance, which is to test sewage and environmental samples for polio. They often confirm wild poliovirus infections in the absence of cases of paralysis. Global coverage shows that of the third doses of polio vaccine in 2024, that was reported at 84%, which was consistent with the previous year, 2023. But that's actually still below pre-pandemic, levels, which was 86%. And so there's still a gap, which is still, it still poses a challenge. So, we really want to make sure people get their their complete full set of vaccinations, And, the eradication system, it relies on the, on the immunization systems that can reach everyone, especially children, because they're the ones at most risk. For public health, so the WHO is trying to crack down on the last small pockets of the small spillovers where the virus still exists, and this is why a lot of countries around the world have rigorous programs on their polio vaccine, so there isn't another huge epidemic in their countries. As of right now, there's no way to treat the disease. No drug seems to have an effect on it. The only thing that I know of that is it has it's like life saving, is the iron lung machine. It's the only way to make someone comfortable. It breathes for you basically due to your breathing muscles being no longer able to function due to being paralyzed. So the whole reason why it became such a bad epidemic in the U.S. back in the 40s and 50s, it's because with personal hygiene levels, conditions going up, young children would be exposed to this virus later on in life, and when a lot of the population before had been exposed as children, and these children were safe due to their maternal antibodies they would get from their mother's milk, and because their children didn't grow up the same way that the parents did, they were more at risk than they were. So the only way to not get the virus is simply preventing itself by getting the vaccine. There are currently no drugs or antibiotics against polio. So it's why at 2 to 4 months of age, when you're a baby, like your parents should get you vaccinated so you can protect yourself and others around you. Also washing your hands, not touching your face, or just simply keeping your hands to yourself. Don't touch everything, to is a good way to avoid it. And if you're more interested in polio, here I actually found this documentary on YouTube. It's called the Polio Crusade. It's very informative, and it shows the creation of the first vaccines against the virus, and it's very educational, and it's very like helpful. So for some interesting facts, so as I'm sure most people know, FDR, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, he had polio, and he actually didn't really let the American public know about it. He was very private about it. A lot of people did not know. It was also World War II, so I think he wanted to look strong, as a leader. And he would often have to have an aide helping him, as you can see in this photo, if someone's holding his hand, he's holding onto the rail right there. Yeah, a lot of people say he actually contracted it when he was a boy at a Boy Scout camp, but he didn't show any symptoms apparently. But he suffered an attack at the age of 39, and that's when it manifested in him. And him and his wife were puzzled because he was 39 years old. He was grown. He was a grown man, and he got sick with it, and it mainly affects children. So it was very puzzling. And yeah. So as mentioned before, as you can see in this next photo of Elvis, Elvis helped against polio by being able to persuade the American public to trust the healthcare system, and he would actually go and visit patients. So as you can see here, like I said, he played a big role, and he actually helped like get young people to get vaccinated. He was like the catalyst for that. He helped teenagers, like young people to take the vaccine because they all saw that he was doing it. Then why not them? In this last photo here, I actually found a movie. Yeah, it's a movie about polio. So it's called Breathe. It came out in 2017, and it tells the life story about a British man who had polio at 28 years old, and how he actually helped design chairs and tools to help make polio patients more mobile, and it also shows how he helped hospitals treat patients more humanely as well, and not just like polio patients, but like all patients, and yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you.